Okay, so let me explain Staphylococcus aureus in a way that's easy to understand.
First of all, Staphylococcus aureus is a type of bacteria that is round in shape, which we call cocci, and it grows in clusters.
A really helpful way to picture it is like a bunch of grapes. In fact, its name literally means golden cluster of grapes, which actually makes a lot of sense when you see it under a microscope. Now, when we stain it using something called a gram stain, it appears purple, which tells us that it is gram positive. This is because it has a thick peptidoglycan cell wall.
Also, when it's grown in the lab on blood agar, the colonies look golden yellow, which is where the Aureus part comes from.
Moving on, Staphylococcus aureus is what we call a facultative anaerobe.
That just means it can survive with or without oxygen, so it's pretty adaptable.
It's also non-motile, meaning it can't move and it doesn't form spores.
One important test we use to identify it is the catalase test. This bacteria produces an enzyme called catalase, which breaks down hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen. So if you add hydrogen peroxide to it, you'll see bubbles forming. This helps us distinguish it from other bacteria like Streptococci, which don't produce bubbles because they're catalase negative.
But here's the thing. Other Staphylococcus species can also be catalase positive.
So, to specifically identify Staphylococcus aureus, we use another test called the coagulase test. This bacterium produces coagulase, which turns fibrinogen into fibrin, basically causing the sample to clump together. If it clumps, it's Staph aureus. If it doesn't, it's likely another species. Now let's talk about where this bacteria lives. Staphylococcus aureus is actually very common. About 25% of people carry it, usually in areas like the nose, armpits, or skin.
Most of the time, it doesn't cause any problems and just exists as part of our normal skin flora.
However, problems start when there's an imbalance or when the skin barrier is broken, for example, through cuts, eczema, or surgery. If that happens, the bacteria can enter the body and cause infections. At first, these infections might be localized, like a pimple that develops into a boil, which we call a furuncle.
If multiple boils group together, that's called a carbuncle.
It can also cause conditions like impetigo, a superficial skin infection, or cellulitis, which spreads deeper into the skin. If the infection goes deeper, it can form an abscess, which is basically a pocket of pus. These can occur almost anywhere in the body, even in organs like the brain or liver. It can also spread to muscles, bones, and joints, causing serious conditions like osteomyelitis or septic arthritis. Now, if the bacteria gets into the bloodstream, things become much more serious. This is called bacteremia, and it can lead to sepsis, which is a life-threatening condition where the body has an extreme immune response. It can also spread to organs like the lungs, causing pneumonia, the brain, causing meningitis, or the heart valves, causing infective endocarditis. Another important thing to know is that Staphylococcus aureus can form biofilms on medical devices like catheters or artificial joints. These biofilms act like a protective shield, making it really hard for antibiotics to work. On top of that, this bacteria produces several toxins. For example, it produces a toxin that can cause toxic shock syndrome, which leads to symptoms like fever, rash, and low blood pressure. Another toxin destroys white blood cells, weakening the immune system, while others can damage red blood cells or cause skin blistering. It can also produce toxins in food that lead to food poisoning, causing vomiting and diarrhea within a few hours. Finally, let's talk about treatment.
Normally, bacterial infections are treated with antibiotics, but Staphylococcus aureus is very good at becoming resistant.
Many strains produce enzymes that break down common antibiotics like penicillin. Some strains, known as MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, are resistant to even stronger antibiotics. Because of this, doctors often have to use alternative antibiotics like vancomycin, although resistance to that is also starting to appear. So overall, Staphylococcus aureus is a very common bacterium that usually lives harmlessly on our skin, but under the right conditions, it can cause anything from mild skin infections to very serious, life-threatening diseases.